Take your Bibles. We're a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching, preaching church. I want you to go to Ephesians chapter 5. And when you get there, just wait on me. I'll be there in a couple of moments. Today, we're continuing our series called Faithful, God's Purpose for My Life. In this series that we started last week, we said we were going to answer three questions. Question number one, do I have a God-given purpose? My purpose starts with my Creator. He created you. He created you to be who He created you to be. And God simply created us to live for and to walk with Him daily. He created all of us with a free will to live for and to walk with Him daily. Question number two, and we're going to unpack this in a moment. Do I have a God-given plan? And then number three, we're going to answer this next week. Do I have God-given promises? So the sequence and the distinction here of purpose, plan, and promise is important because we often think they are one and the same, which can only lead to confusion and frustration. So my purpose is who and what God designed me for. God simply designed you with a free will, and His hopes is that you will live with and for Him on a daily basis. That is your purpose. That is it. Is to be the person who God created you to be, and that is someone who walks with God and who lives for God on a daily basis. So don't overcomplicate that. Amen. Thank you, Amber. So my promise, so my plan, I want you to look at it this way. My purpose is who God designed me to be. My plan is the path that leads to fulfilling God's purpose for my life. My promise is the destination and the guarantee along the path as I walk out and live out God's plan for my life. So aren't you thankful that God didn't create you and said, this is who I want you to be. Here's the plan that I have for you. Good luck. Let me know how that works out. How many are thankful that He is walking with us as His plan is unfolding in our life? So again, God's purpose never changes. He created us to be someone who would walk with Him and to live for Him on a daily basis. That is our purpose. But His plan unfolds over time. And God's promises is what anchors me while that plan unfolds. So here's how faithfulness connects all of those. God's expectation is for us to be faithful in His purpose, in His plan, and in His promises. So I want to get started this morning. We're going to unpack that second question. What is God's plan for my life? Again, if you go to Google, this is in the billions of searches. God's plan or God's purpose for my life. Now, on the surface in the church world, that may sound a little spiritual, but underneath it reveals a deeper fear. What we're really asking is, what if I mess this up? What if I choose the wrong job? Or what if I marry the wrong person? What if I miss the moment that God intended for me? For many of us, this question hasn't brought peace. It has simply brought paralysis. It's paralyzed us. It's a hidden cost for asking the wrong question. For some of us, this question has actually slowed our obedience. We didn't say yes because we were waiting for clarity. We didn't move because we were waiting for certainty. And as we are waiting for a plan from God, days, opportunities, and relationships pass us by because the fear of missing God's will and plan kept us from walking in it. The fear of missing God's will and plan often has kept us from walking in His plan. So here's the tension. We have to solve the tension of God's plan and the process of that plan becoming a reality in our life. So the problem isn't that God doesn't have a plan. The problem is we've treated God's plan like a destination instead of a process. That's why so many people, nobody Googles what is the process of discovering God's plan. The Google is, I want to know, what is God's plan for my life? What is God's purpose for my life? We fail to realize that there is a process of understanding and walking out and discovering God's plan for our life. So I need you to kind of change your thought process a little bit instead of saying, well, one day I'm just going to find God's plan and then everything's going to be great. I'm going to be able to live this. No, it's not that way. It is a process. It unfolds over time. And when you treat God's plan like a destination Every step feels dangerous. Every decision feels final. Every delay feels like failure. So what I want us to do, we're going to pivot a little bit this morning. Instead of asking about what is God's plan for my life, a better question may be, how does God's plan actually unfold in my life? How often are we looking for like this supernatural moment in our life, the destination of God's plan being revealed? When I think about things like that, I think about Saul, who was on his road to Damascus, and he encountered Christ, and then you have this big dramatic moment. It's like a big show. You have the bright lights, and you have the audible voice from Christ speaking to Paul, saying, this is going to be my plan for your life. And then I think about Moses living on the backside of the desert, and God speaks in a burning bush. Wouldn't you like to take a selfie by that? Would that not be cool to say, look what God just did in my life? Well, we talked about Mary a couple of weeks ago. What about Mary? The angel appears to her at night and says, listen, you're going to be pregnant and you're going to have a child and you're going to call him Jesus and he's going to be the Savior of the world and you are going to be the mother of Jesus. And I look at those stories and those plans that God had for those people and I think, wow, wouldn't it be awesome if God would speak to me that way? Wouldn't that be great? If God spoke in this incredible, magnificent, just this wow moment. But how many of you know that God doesn't always speak that way? And God's plan is not always that obvious. So what we want to know today is how do we walk out this plan when it's not that obvious of what we're supposed to be doing? Here's my big idea today. God's plan is always unfolding. So again, it's not like a destination, like I'm going to discover the plan and everything's going to be great. No, this plan is always unfolding. It's a process as you become the person who God wants you to become. So I want to give you 3 thoughts today. Here's why. I want you to put these in your backpack, and I want you to take them home with you today. God's plan continues to unfold as, number 1, it's in your notes, I live out His purpose. God's plan unfolds in my life as I live out His purpose. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. And here's what the Apostle Paul said. He says, be very careful. Now, I want you to underline that, circle that word, highlight that, and then how you live. That's another word that we're going to talk about here in a moment. So the Apostle Paul says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. So life is a walk, a path that we journey each day. God does have a clear plan and path for your life. And He expects us to walk that path carefully that He has already prepared for us. So we learned this last week that before time, God had already created you to be who He wanted you to be in His mind. He's also created a plan. And He has a purpose for your life. And so God's already designed that as well. So, but when you treat God's plan like a destination, again, all of this feels dangerous. Every decision feels final. All of these things. But my big idea is that God's plan is always unfolding in your life. And God expects you to be faithful to the plan and the purpose that He has for your life. So Paul encourages us to walk as a wise person and not as an unwise person. An unwise person is not concerned about watching for and walking out God's plan for their life. I would say an unwise person is not concerned how they drive in Northwest Arkansas. Whether it's slow or they have nothing to do whatsoever. But the wise are walking each step very carefully and thoughtfully. Now, many of us, unfortunately, we're trying to live out the words of Frank Sinatra. I did it my way. Well, the news is this morning, this is not Burger King and Frank Sinatra's dead, so you can't have it your way. 2 words from this verse that build out a word picture for us. The word careful, it's the Greek word, akribos, and here's what it means. This is not the carefulness that causes anxiety like you're walking on the edge, you know. And Todd, I was thinking about skiing this morning, and I was preaching in the tent, and, you know, people who are careful, when you get close to an edge, as for me, that creates anxiety within me, a little bit of healthy fear that I need to slow down, and I'm not Yeah, a gold medalist in skiing. So it creates, but that's not what this word means here. You guys still following me this morning? It's the type of care that causes you to realize that there is a clear path, and I must be careful in choosing and walking that path. Now, the word live, the Greek word here, is more concerned with the path of life and not just the number of days lived. Each day takes on a pattern that lives thoroughly, carefully, and it all builds in a direction, and that direction should be God's direction. So it's impossible to live for God when I'm living the way I want to live. So again, I get it. We all want Burger King. We all want it our way. But here's what I know. God's blessing is on His plan and not my plan. God's blessing is on His path and not my path. His blessing, His favor, and His grace is not on my... Because here's what I learned the hard way when I got out of school and rebelled against God. If you say, Lord, I'm going to do this my way, God's going to let you do it your way. He's going to say something like, good luck. Let me know how that works out. And He's going to be waiting on you when that plane crashes. When that plan crashes, He's going to be waiting on you because God never gives up on you. Even when you make foolish decisions, even when we sin, God doesn't give up on us. But I'm here to tell you, God's only going to bless His way. And the plan that He's created you before you were ever born, that's the plan He's going to bless. Now, many people aim to live on their time, when God has given us a set amount of time to do what He's called us to do. In other words, we're living on borrowed time. None of us are giving an unlimited number of days on this earth. We have to realize that each one is meant to count as a day thoroughly lived for God. So I want you to watch this. Every decision, every relationship, every activity should lead you in the direction of becoming the person who God intended for you to be. So again, God's purpose for your life, He intended for you to be a person with a free will who daily would freely to choose to walk with and to live for God, again, on a daily basis. And that plan, watch this, is what's going to unfold as you become the person who God intended for you to be. So every decision that you make, every activity that you're involved in, every relationship should lead you into the direction of becoming the person who God created you to be. Man, that's really good. Y'all not even giving me a Baptist like amen this morning. Let me give you something free today. Y'all want something free before I move on from this point? God's plan often finds you. God's plan often finds you. Saul's on his road to Damascus, going back to Saul. He didn't get up that day thinking, well, today I'm going to have an encounter with Christ and God's plan is going to be revealed for my life. No, God's plan found him. Moses is on the backside of the desert, tending sheep, thinking this was just another day. He didn't get up that day thinking the bush is going to speak to me and God's going to tell me to go and deliver His people out of bondage. No, it found him. Mary didn't say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to get pregnant. That whole process, and I'm going to become the... No, she didn't do any of that. An angel appeared to her. An angel found her. Mary didn't find the angel. She wasn't like Googling for the angel. So here's what I want you to know. So look at it this way. God's purpose is for me to become someone who's going to live forward, to walk with Him daily. And as I'm doing that, here's what I know. God's plan is going to find me. So as I begin to live out and as I become a part of this process of becoming who God created me to be, God's plan is going to find me. So you don't have to Google what is God's plan for your life, because God will find you. That's really good. Number 2, God's plan also unfolds as He redeems my pain. Ephesians 5:16, making the most of every opportunity. Everybody say opportunity. And then he tells us why, because the days are evil. So Paul does not deny the days are evil. He assumes it. Pain is not evidence that God's plan has failed. Pain is evidence we live in a broken world where redemption is still at work. If God's plan were only revealed in ideal situations, none of us would ever see it. God's plan does not unfold in place of pain. It unfolds through pain. The meaning of the word opportunity is in this verse means there's an opportunity for redemption, not necessarily convenience. As a matter of fact, if you go and read this in the original language, that phrase, making the most of every opportunity, is one word in the Greek. It's the word redeem. So just in your notes, outside of opportunity, right there, write that word, redeem. Now, redeem does not mean avoid hardship. It does not mean escape difficulty. It means to recognize value where others only see loss. To redeem is to reclaim something that looks wasted and bring it back into God's purpose. Some of your days will be dark. I'm not here to tell you everything's going to be great. You're going to have some days that are going to be dark. And Paul's already told us there are going to be some days that are going to be filled with evil. But here's what I know. My God is still on the throne, and His plan is still at work in my life. That's what I know, that God's plan is always working, and it's always unfolding in my life. So we have to stop interpreting pain as missing God's plan for our life. Because how often do we assume pain means that we took a wrong turn? Well, I grew up that way, because if I made a poor decision or did something, Dad would cause me pain with a belt. And some of y'all don't even know what this is. Y'all go do timeout or whatever you're supposed to do in timeout. Dad, the only timeout he would take is he'd rest and whip me some more. That's the only timeout I knew. But so I grew up knowing that if I make a wrong turn or do something dumb, I'm going to experience pain in my life. And I think some of us feel that way with God, that every time we feel pain or something doesn't go our way, we think somehow God's punishing us, and now God no longer has a plan or a purpose for us. That's not biblical. There's not anything about that is right. Here's what I know, that God could be using your pain to shape you, to serve other people, because there's just some things you don't become who you were intended to be without the pain in your life. I'm not the person that I was before I lost Lisa, and Christy's not the person she was before she lost Ed. I'm just here to tell you, in that pain, God has a way of shaping you to become the person He intended for you to be. And you can't become that person when everything is on the mountaintop and everything is going as you plan. But it's in the unplanned and the unfair and the unexplained moments in your life that God says, I'm going to use that pain and I'm going to shape you to become the person I intended for you to be. So if you're expecting this walk with God to be without pain, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to work that way. God He can use and redeem this pain to prepare and perfect me to become the person He intended for me to be. God would say to His people in Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 11, I love this first phrase. This is the message part of it. He says, I know what I'm doing. I say that to Christy all the time. I know what I'm doing. Come on, it don't work out very good. I know what I'm doing. And watch what God says. He says, I have it all planned out. He said, I have a plan to take care of you. I have a plan not to abandon you. I have a plan to give you a future that you can hope for. I just want you to know that even in the broken, the hurting, and the ugly moments of your life, God uses that as part of His plan for your life. Because again, you can't become who He intended for you to be if everything is rosy in life. But it's that tension, it's that pressure, it's that stress, it's that brokenness that God says, I'm going to use all of that and I'm going to put all that to good. And out of all of that, you will become stronger and you will have more faith and you will become not who you are, but who I intended for you to be. God knows what He's doing in your life even when you don't. I just want you to know there's not anything that God cannot redeem in His plan. You see, His plan is not fragile. It doesn't fall apart when life does. And some of you this morning, you might be thinking, I've already made a mess of my life. How many times have you said, my life looks like a hot mess? Nobody on this side. Has anybody on this side ever said, my life looks like a hot mess? And sometimes that hot mess is our own doing. It's our own poor decisions. It's our own sin. But life may be falling apart, but God's plan is not. How many times have you said, I really made a mess of this? I've made some poor decisions in my life. All of your pain from your mistakes and mishaps, I want you to know they are not wasted. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58 says, stand firm. Everybody say stand firm. Let nothing move you as you busy yourself in the Lord's work. Be sure that nothing you do for Him is ever lost or is it ever wasted. So don't make the mistake of judging the faithfulness of God based on your feelings. Because sometimes it's going to feel like God is nowhere around. There are going to be times it may even look like or feel like that God is actually working against you. And all the pain that you feel because of the sin or the poor decisions or all the wrong turns in life. But God said, listen, don't judge the faithfulness of God based on your feelings or based on your situation or based on your season. Because here's what I know. My God is still on the throne, and He is a faithful God, and He will do what He says He will do, and He will continue to perfect you to become the person He intended for you to be. Oh. So when God redeems, this is what I like when God redeems. When God redeems something, when He takes something that was lost, when He takes something that was broken, when He takes something in your life that you would like to delete. How many of you ever had that? How would you like to have life that had a delete button with it? Or a giant eraser where you could delete that. It's like, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I couldn't, all that, and delete it, erase it, and all that. But God says, I'm going to take everything that you want to delete. I'm going to take all of those things the devil continues to remind you of, and some of your friends remind you of, all the failures and all your flaws. And He says, I'm going to redeem that. Now watch this. When God redeems something, He doesn't just take something that was broken or lost in your life that you thought was wasted and give you something in exchange. No, He multiplies it back to you. When you look at Job in the Old Testament, and God allowed his favor to be taken away, and the devil came in and took everything from him. And when God said, that's enough, I'm going to replace it, and I'm going to redeem what was broken in Job's life, He just did not give him back exactly what he lost, but He says, I'm going to give it back times two. That's my God. He is a multiplier. And God said, I'm going to take all of those times that you want to get away, all of those times that are filled with pain, and I'm going to multiply that, and I'm going to redeem it back into your life. You see, God redeems pain as part of the process. God redeems pain as part of the process, not as proof we missed the plan. Again, I'm trying to change your thinking here. We experience pain, and you're like, wait a minute, I made a mistake. Not necessarily. God's going to redeem. And y'all feel this. God's going to redeem that. And He's going to multiply it back to you again. Number 3, God's plan. I got to get all this out. I embarrassed Christy. I'll be at Walmart, and I'll be telling somebody about this sermon, so I got to get it all out. Y'all got to help me today. I got to get it all out. God's plan also unfolds as I surrender to His process. Now, again, I got to change your thinking. Quit looking at God's plan as a destination and start looking at God's plan as a process. So I'm walking His plan, following His path. I don't know why I'm doing the robot thing. That's not how I walk. I just realized that. But I'm following this plan. Now watch this. But I have to surrender to the process. So it's like, point A, I receive salvation. I'm a Christ follower. I am now starting a process of becoming the person who God intended for me to be. Now, the first thing I have to do is I have to surrender to that process. I have to surrender to the fact that God knows more than I know. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 17 says, therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. So Paul contrasts foolishness with understanding, not ignorance. This tells me that God wants us to know His will for our life. The word for foolishness, here's what it means. It means a lack of perspective or lacking the overall picture. Let that settle. Isn't that good? The word understand here is not about downloading information. It's about putting things together over the process of time. You see, God's will is rarely revealed like all at once. It is discerned as we walk with Him. You don't discover God's will. You discern it as you surrender to His process. As you surrender to the process of becoming who God intended for you to become. Are you following me? As you surrender, then His plan becomes more real, more relevant in your life every day. That's why Paul doesn't say, well, figure out God's plan. He says, understand the Lord's will. Understanding requires humility. It says, understanding God's will says, Lord, I want your will, not my way, not my will. Understanding requires patience. Hello. Understanding requires trust. Hello. God's will is a process before it is a position. God's will is not just where you are going, it's who you are becoming along the way. Isn't that good that God has this picture in mind of the person He intended for you to be before you were ever born? And some of us, what we need to start doing is trusting the process and quit worrying about the outcome and quit worrying about the finish line. Because some of us, you guys, you're kind of like what Christy does sometimes. She argues with the GPS. She's like, I don't have a problem with that. And so what happens is the GPS in my car is a lady's voice. So I got one voice telling me to go left, and then I got another lady's voice saying, that don't look like the way we should be going. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Any of y'all do that? Any of you? Okay. My whole point is, that's how we are with God. It's like God's telling us, this is the way I want you to walk. This is the plan. This is the path. And we look down that path and go, well, there's pain down there. I don't like all that. So, Lord, that don't look like the way I want to go. That doesn't look like the way I should be going. That's not what I have planned out. Some of us just need to trust the process. And more than that, we need to trust the person who created that process for our life. And trust when God says, I know exactly what I'm doing. I want you to be who I created you to be, not who you want to be, and not who others say they want you to be. But here's my purpose, and here's my plan. And what we need to do is surrender to that process and just say, Lord, I trust you. Because if God revealed the entire plan up front, we would skip the formation and chase the outcome. But God's more committed to your character than He is your comfort. More committed to your holiness than He is your happiness. That's why His plan unfolds through a process that we must surrender to. I'm going to tell you, God's plan is never going to unfold in your life until you say, Lord, that's it. Now, if you have a hard head, you're going to experience a lot of pain and a lot of bumps and a lot of dead ends. It's going to be a lot of discouragement and a lot of frustration until you finally just say, because here's the thing that I've learned my own way, because I have a little bit of knowledge about hard head. So is God will continue to pursue you. And God's going to continue to pursue you. Why? Because He created you with purpose, to live for, to walk with Him every single day. So He's like, hey, what's up? Hey, I'm still here. Hey, you're doing your own thing, but what about me? I still have a purpose for you, and I still have a plan for your life. So make no mistake, God has a purpose, and God has a plan for your life, and He's not going to give up on you. I say it all the time, don't give up on God, because God has not given up on you. But we have to choose surrender over control. We struggle to surrender because surrender feels like we're losing control of our life. But biblically, surrender, here's what it means: trust. So where am I demanding answers before obedience? What am I trying to control instead of surrender? Have I mistaken delay for denial? Am I obeying what God has already made clear in my life? Some people are wandering through life going, God doesn't have a plan for me. I don't understand God's plan. When they're not even being obedient in the things that are clear in their life. The foolish say, once I understand everything, then I will obey. The wise say, I'll obey when I understand and trust God when I don't. I'm going to put my trust in His process. I'm going to put my trust in that God knows what He's doing. I want you to know ahead of time. There will be steps and there's going to be seasons of your life that and His plan that will be unexpected. There's going to be some unfair moments. There's going to be some uncomfortable times and even unexplained. But you're going to have to come to the conclusion Listen, you either trust God or you don't trust God. And do you trust God when you understand it or even when you don't understand it? Do you trust God when the path looks clear or when the path doesn't look clear? The point is, you're going to have to surrender and trust God's process. King David wrote in Psalm 138 in verse 8, he says, the Lord will work out. Everybody say work out. Work out means to accomplish or it means to perfect. The Lord will work out. The Lord will. That's a proclamation. The Lord will work out, accomplish, or perfect His plans for my life. Now, this verse is emphasizing God's personal investment to carry out His plans despite our inability to understand His plans. Because God will work out His plans, I can surrender to His process. Here's what I know, and here's what I learned. I didn't read this in a commentary. They didn't teach me this in a Bible school. I have just learned through my own life, and as I continue to follow the plan and the purpose of God. He doesn't always download the full picture, because if it did, it would scare us to death, and some of us would give up on God in the very beginning. But here's what I've learned. I've learned to just take one step and say, Lord, I'm going to trust you with the next step. And Lord, I'm going to take the next step, and I'm going to trust you for the next step. I'm talking about we have to learn to trust His plan and to follow His process, even when we don't like it, when we don't agree with it, when we don't understand it. If it's not the process we have been chosen, how many have ever said, well, this has taken a lot longer than I thought it was going to take, or Lord, I didn't plan to be here. Lord, I didn't plan to be divorced. Lord, I didn't plan to lose my job. I didn't plan for my kids to not live for the Lord. I didn't plan to be sickness. But Lord, here's what I do know is I'm going to trust you. I may not like this process. I may not agree with this process, but Lord, I'm going to trust you that you have my best interests at heart, that you know what you're doing. When we surrender to that, God's plan continues to unfold in our life. God's plan for your life is not fragile. You haven't missed it, and you don't stumble on it by accident. But God's plan, I hope you get this big idea this week. It unfolds as I'm walking out, living out, becoming the person who God created me to be. Now, next week, man, we're going to talk about the promises that God gives us. That's going to anchor us and sustain us as we walk out and live out to become the person who God intended for us to be. Y'all didn't get excited about that. That's all right. I'll be excited. Would you bow your heads this morning, please?